Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance right here on Channel 6. And I'm yours, Gail Teixeira, Parliamentary Chief Whip for the PPP in Parliament and, of course, the People's Progressive Party. And so on this program, we focus on matters of public importance, bring you information, discussions on issues and matters that are of concern to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30 right here on Channel 6. And as usual, before we get into the media program, I remind you of the numbers you can call, 225-0010 and 225-0008 after 1 o'clock. And so please remember, if your numbers are blocked, I can't take them. So I apologize for that, but that's a policy, and so we need to abide by that. As usual, Officer Lee, the opposition is busy these days. Lots of people coming in to seek guidance, to seek advice, to just express and ventilate how upset they are and disappointed with the way in which the country is going and where their lives are going. And so 304 Church Street, between New Garden and Peter Rose Street, opposite the Border Cricket Ground. And we're open Monday to Friday all day, and of course on Saturdays half day. So you're welcome to pop in and to see different MPs there, or to speak to people in the office. And of course you can call in advance, 225-3432, if you wish to speak to anybody, or you can you're living out of town and you need advice on what to do. So instead of traveling all the way to Georgetown, which is very expensive. Freedom Radio continues to broadcast on FM 91.1 Demerara, 90.5 Berbice, and 90.7 Essequibo. So you can hear a number of programs and interesting topics there. And of course, the Mirror newspaper, the oldest existing newspaper in Guyana and in the Caribbean since 1961, is now online free for you. And so you can register and read it on www.facebook.com/Weekend Mirror News. And there's lots of news in there too for you, and so interesting articles. Well, last week we had member Irfan Ali with us, former Minister of Housing and Water and former Minister of Trade, Industry and Commerce, and we focused on the economy. And you know, it suddenly struck me when we were doing it that when I worked as Chedi, as his personal assistant, Dr. Jagan, we would go out on Regent Street, and Chedi would take his flipboard, his flip chart, and set it up at the corner of Wellington and Regent, near here, and explain to people about the budgets. And so every year we did this. He sometimes would go to the border market, to Stabroek Market, to places where in the south of the city, Albois Town, set up the flip chart and explain to people the numbers, the economy, the budget, because we fundamentally believe in the PPP that an informed population is the best population to have, so they can make informed choices and decisions about their lives and the future of their country. And so in those days we didn't have internet, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have television, we didn't have, very few people had phones, and of course radio was controlled and owned only by the state in those days. So that was our form of communication, going out to bottom house meetings. What struck me about last week's event was that program is here we have used technology to explain the economy in a very sophisticated manner, but simplified. And so we're using the Facebook, the social media, television, radio, Mirror newspaper, and a range of other opportunities, including community meetings, to explain to people what's going on in the country. And the economy is, of course, critical to how the government is mismanaging this country. So Irfan, we have now launched into much more modern times. Irfan wasn't probably even born at those times when we did that. Yesterday was Emancipation Day. And you know, I don't think people realize that Guyana was the first country, well then it was a colony that under the Dutch at that time, that had the first slave revolution, not rebellion. We talk about the 1763 rebellion. In fact, it was a revolution in that it overthrew the Dutch government in the area of Berbice and actually managed some kind of governance in that 1 year before it was quelled and savagely and brutally put down. And of course, the 1763 revolution came before the Haitian Revolution in 1801. And so, in fact, Guyana has that notoriety to be able to claim the level of a rebellion and activity against the Dutch colonizers, against the plantation owners, and of course that continued right through until slavery was abolished and further on. I hope everyone was able to reflect on the brave and valiant struggles of our people to end slavery, and after that to end indentureship and to bring in a strong trade union movement which was led by Nathaniel Critchlow, and furthermore win independence and restore democracy in 1992. These are decades of struggles and long history of struggle, which we as Guyanese, regardless of our ethnicity, regardless of our political opinions, regardless of religion and gender, should all be proud of the fact that we have this very profound and long struggle, long history of struggle for righteousness, for what is right and just, and that struggle will continue as we go towards the 2020 election and further on. But what was interesting, and I wanted to bring to your attention, and this may be controversial, but President Granger's message, which was reported in the newspapers to Betty-for-Wachting, East Coast, concerned me. And so I want to quote from sections of it so that in case you didn't see the newspapers today. And so I'm quoting different sections, and so you can see it, you can hear it. You must be ashamed if you do not have work. Some people are proud that they don't have work. They want a raise. They always want a raise. People get a raise today, they expect to come back to want another raise. But we'll have to promote self-employment in this village and other villages. Go out there and use your talent to enrich yourself and your children. This is economic emancipation. We must go out there and use our talent. If we make our living by hanging around the corner and liming at the Guinness bar, we will be forever poor. But if we go into our farm, go into our workshops, go into our schools, we will be able to bring prosperity. Let's put our monies in boots, buses, and bicycles, not in vodka, rum, and gin. Let's put our children first. So, of course, you know, that on the surface, for some people, maybe it's okay. He's right. But is that the reality? Is that the reality of our country? And I should be interested to hear your views on the message given by the president. He has focused basically in the last few emancipations and generally his philosophy of the family, church, work as critical areas, and the community are the four critical kind of platforms that he speaks a lot on, whether it's on agriculture, whether it's Amerindian heritage, whether it's emancipation, whether it's indentured labor. It's all the same basic message. And so, of course, the church, family, community, and work. And so it seems to be this emancipation was on the issue of work. And I've heard him at the Amerindian Heritage function at St. Cuthbert's last night talk about a similar line that if every village became self-sufficient and was able to exploit their farms and everything, they would provide enough work for every village on its own. That is an impossibility, and therefore I don't even want to go down the road of arguing that right now. That's a level for a whole another discussion. But to try to balkanize and to make villages self-sufficient when you're trying to do nation building seems to me a contradiction. However, but I have some questions for the president, because having heard that, yes, there are people who, you know, lime around and don't want to work. But they're not the majority of people of our country. The majority of people of our country want to work, want to do better, work hard, and generally want to improve the conditions of life for their people. I mean, the quote by the president about gin, vodka, and rum, it seems to forget beer. But anyway, maybe that's because of the class of people he's dealing with. But I'm not sure a number of working class men drink a lot of vodka and gin. Generally, it's rum and beer. But anyway, as they tend to be cheaper. But if I judge by the MP's lounge in Parliament, boy, is there a big selection of liquor and foreign brands. Maybe the president doesn't know that, and maybe he should start with his ministers first of all, because we in the opposition do not drink anything of liquor in the Parliament MP's lounge, whether it's my birthday or anybody's birthday. We just don't do it. This is taxpayers' money buying this stuff. And if you want to see the foreign beer, come and have a peep sometimes at the MP's lounge. But anyway, that's just me being, you know, putting in a snide one there. But let me have some questions for our president. His government has caused the economy to decline and all the productive sectors to decline, with what are bad policies and a tax-driven approach to development. Wrong or right? And removing incentives to allow people to diversify and expand. How can he ignore the fact that approximately 25,000 people have lost their jobs in the last 3 years across all sectors? Multiply that 25,000 by 5. You have over 100,000 people who are being impacted on directly by the breadwinner or breadwinners of a home losing their jobs. So where are people to get work? How will they create self-employment? You know, you're telling people go out on their farms. How many people have farms? You're talking about rural people may have some farms, but even in areas like BV, not everybody has a farm. If you go to Buxton, not everybody has a farm. If you come to Georgetown, certainly that doesn't apply, and that's the largest population base in the country. The president promotes self-employment, but the economy is in trouble, and people's purchasing power has declined. So who are the self-employed going to serve? Who's going to buy their services and or their products if the economy is going down and so many people have lost their jobs? This to me is so, it is so commonsensical that I find the statements by the president, again, somewhere in some other world. Because if you go and ask any of the many people in this country who are self-employed, the ones who run hairdressing salons, not only in Georgetown, in the villages, a bottom house arrangement, a little salon they create in their homes or under their houses, the number of people who do nail craft, the seamstresses who have traditionally been self-employed, they work in their homes and they produce, the caterers, the number of people who have got into catering to cater for events, to make cakes and cupcakes and pastries and all these things. Electricians, plumbers, taxi drivers. Majority of these are self-employed. What is happening to them? And if you go on, what's happening to their businesses? When electricians were hard to find because they were so busy before 2015, you try getting an electrician now, they're calling you looking to see if you have anything to fix. The same thing with plumbers, because there's a decline. You go into a number of the retail services, the retail businesses where they sell clothes and shoes and stuff, all of that is on decline. The number of customers have reduced. All of these issues, when we talk about the number of people who've lost their jobs, you're talking about increased levels of poverty across Guyana. And let's look at that. Let's examine that. When the government fired 1,972 Amerindian Community Service officers in July 2015, the government removed approximately $700 million from approximately 10,000 people dependent on the earnings of those young people. 700 million people removed from what were interior areas and interior villages of dependence of those people. And therefore it had a ripple effect on the small village economies and the small regional economies in those interior areas. You have less to buy. You don't have the money. And where do people find work in the interior, for example? I've heard the Prime Minister talk about what they call the dried tomatoes, the tomato processing going on, I think it's in Region 8, the peanut butter production in Region 9. You know, we go back to the 1970s with the Middle Halsey Project, which told people, produce, produce, produce in Region 8, and they produced English potatoes and huge tomatoes and breadfruit and onions. Where was the market? The government was not assisting the market, so things rotted on the airfields in Region 8. When we talk about peanut production, the same thing. People were told, produce cashews and peanuts, and they did in the 70s and 80s. The farmers went gung-ho and did it. And what happened? The flights for Guyana Airways were going out, bringing out the peanuts and the cashews, but the farmers weren't being paid by Guyana stores in those days. So all of that collapsed. And here we go again. Here we go again. The difference is that this government is not giving any support to people who are self-employed. When the government, so that's the interiors, just that taking that one issue, 1,972 people losing their jobs at one fell sweep by Vice President number 4, Mr. Sidney Allicock, sending them letters saying they're out. This does not include the number of other people who were working in the interior regions, Amerindian young people as accountants and accounts clerks and clerks who also lost their jobs. We're not even adding them in. So you can imagine the impact on these economies, these small economies in the regions and the villages. But let's continue. When the government fired hundreds of public servants, what happened to them and their families? Did many of them find back jobs? No. A number of them have been hustling to leave the country. Some managed to get jobs overseas, and others are sitting trying to scrounge with their savings and stretch their savings as long as possible. When the government has refused to finalize the salary and conditions of services in a multi-year agreement for the teachers. Since 2015, when the multi-year agreement that the teachers had with the PPP government expired, they've been trying to get a new multi-year agreement, which would be salaries, conditions of service, the housing program, duty-free concessions for those at certain levels with cars, vehicles. 2015, 2016, 2017, the teachers threatened to go on strike in November 2017. Suddenly, the government woke up. The president set up a task force of union and government. Since April, the task force report has been finished and handed to the government. Up to now, there is no discussion, no release on what is happening with the teachers' salaries. And yet teachers have to go into their pockets to buy materials and aids for the classrooms of the teachers, the children they're teaching. This is not provided for. What has happened to the public servants? I'm waiting to hear Patrick Yard, who was very, very, very vociferous on the PPC. What is going on with the public servant salaries? They're still living at the salaries that they were getting in 2015, the teachers, the public servants. And so, with the cost of living increase, and with the taxes having increased for VAT on education, goods, on water and electricity, the increase in fuel, the actual purchasing power of these people have been reduced when they're still retaining a 2015 salary. What has happened to the different services? It's a large group of army, police, prison, fire, thousands of men and women who have not got a salary increase from 2015, who used to look forward to the 13th month salary they used to get from the PPP. So everybody in the discipline services would get 1 month, a 13th month, every calendar year of whatever their salary was at that time. And this is what helped them to save. They would look forward to buying things at that time that they needed. They look forward to it. Since 2016, where has it disappeared to? They have not given out any of the bonus month salaries to any of the discipline services, and also no salary increase. And so these are facts. And so when we had Irfan with us last week, and we were looking at some of the macroeconomic statistics, what's going on with production, these are facts now that fit into what Mr. Granger is talking about. Is it real or not? And so let us do what they call in the United States a fact check on what's going on. Let's put the president's statement in the context of reality. A fact check, the economy, facts, facts, facts. First of all, the fact. All indicators are pointing to an economy that is deteriorating and requires what they call counter-cyclical policies. What that means is to start reversing some of the policies to remedy the situation. That's what it means. Fact. The government's tax-oriented approach to growth and policies are responsible for the deteriorating economy, with the introduction of more taxes for every category, as well as increased fees on a broad range of licenses. True or false? Let us look at this imposition of 200 new taxes. First of all, it increased the government revenues by $11.2 billion by mid-2017, so that their revenue earnings was $97.1 billion. But it cost the people of this country, the taxpayers of this country, those who don't pay tax, an additional $10.7 billion in their disposable income. So $10.7 billion of our disposable income as workers in the country, people who earn money in the country, was removed from us. in the form of taxes. And what did that do? It contributed to a series of things. People are watching what they buy. They're not spending as they were before. And it led to non-performing loans. And of course, as I said, people aren't buying. A reduction, a demand reduction on goods and services. And of course, concomitantly, an increase in poverty. And it is projected by the end of 2018, with these level of taxes continuing, because they haven't withdrawn any of them, that a total of $20 billion of our money as citizens of this country, in purchasing power will be lost from us. And yet the president says, go out, work, produce, prosper. How can you prosper with $20 billion less across the country in everybody's pockets? Fact, let's go to another fact. There's a marked reduction in the overall demand for goods and services. What I said is attributed to reduced disposable income. The dwindling sugar and forestry sectors that did employ in excess of 40,000 people directly, the downsizing of many businesses, and the reduction in investment in agriculture, mining, quarrying, and manufacturing has cost over $3.8 billion when compared to 2016. Fact, traditional industries, again, such as sugar, livestock, and forestry, continue to decline with dire consequences for thousands of people employed in these sectors and their family, and consequential heavy impact on foreign revenue earning. Fact, the export of sugar, rice, bauxite, and molasses contracted by $18 million loss in revenue in foreign exchange. That must have an impact. That must have an impact not on the economy, but on the people. Money filters, money moves. Money has to be moving, circulating all the time to be able to make more money. That's how it works. Fact, the overall balance of payment recorded a deficit of US $46 million during the first half of 2017, with key traditional products such as sugar, timber, rice, and even gold, all recording a decline in export earnings from $519.2 million in mid-2016 to $503.5 million in mid-2017. Fact, the sugar industry, one of the largest employers in the country, has been plagued by a government-orchestrated tailspin with incoherent policies and really what appears sometimes as a sheer vindictiveness, resulting in 7,000 workers losing their jobs and the serious impact on their families, because again, multiply by 5, and then multiply that in terms of the impact in the communities where people will cut down on the number of food they buy or services they buy or clothes they buy or the amount of times they travel. Fact, and of course there's the impact on children going to school. If the parents aren't working, how do you find money to send them in the minibus to go to school or to buy materials or to buy uniforms? So the ripple effect of this is enormous. Fact, the rice industry experienced a decline in foreign exchange earnings during this period. The loss of foreign revenue stood at $48 million US. So this is a major impact on the rice industry. The same thing with mining and quarrying have contracted, as I said earlier. Fact, the financial and insurance services have contracted primarily due to the increase in non-performing loans from 11.9% to 13.1%. Of which 61% of this figure is concentrated among business enterprises. Many of them are small business enterprises. The other 39% includes low-income families and farmers who are losing their properties, their machinery, because they can no longer afford to pay for their loans. In addition to that, and I said on the program the last week that if you look at the official gazette and what is called the execution orders, execution sales, the number of banks that are putting up machinery, houses, land for sale, because these are non-performing loans. Fact, the government continues to crowd out, outstrip, and deprive the private sector of much credit for investment, with domestic credit to central government increasing by 10.2%, while credit to private sector grew by a mere 1.4%. And so if we go back and look at this, the government continues to outstrip the private sector, and by the first half of 2018, credit to the private sector fell by $4.6 billion, while central government took an additional $21 billion in credit from the banking services. So that we're seeing again This is the president saying, go out, invest, do things, work. And yet, your access to credit is being reduced for the private sector and for ordinary citizens because the government is outcrowding the whole situation. There's no shadow of doubt that the economy is in dire state. Indicators are showing strong signs of distress and an imminent economic failure with a severe shortage of foreign currency, foreign exchange, the decline of key foreign revenue streams, which I've mentioned, sugar, bauxite, forestry, and even rice to an extent, while concurrently the Bank of Guyana foreign reserve continues to be depleted and servicing our external debt is becoming more burdensome. The huge increase in external debt service payments means that there would be less foreign exchange to cover imports. And we'd given the figure last time in relation to external debt service payment, grew by 24.3 million to 85.3 million US dollars, or 59.1% when compared to the corresponding period in 2017. So in less than a year, they have increased the level of debt, external debt. The loss of foreign currency earning of 18 million during the first quarter of 2018 when compared to a corresponding period in 2014 ironically is equivalent to 95% of the total new debt that was added in 2018 by the government. The government had commenced 2018 by racking up one of the largest budget deficits ever in decades. High cost of implementation, coupled with a large budget deficit, points to a burgeoning end-of-year fiscal deficit. All these facts put the president's statement in context. What we have been treated to is rhetoric. We have Mr. Harman going to Buxton and, of course, trying to put it over that the PPP never did anything. And so he says that with revenue accrued from oil, Guyanese can look forward to new markets, improved health care, infrastructure. And he says that the flicker that was dim needs to be rekindled. He says, we are going to ensure we give you back that spark. I find it quite laughable. And so here he goes, he'll give back the spark to the people of Buxton. But all of these statements by the president, by the ministers at different events, Mr. Williams, Mr. Harman in Linden, Mr. Gaskin, they're hollow, they're shallow. If we're talking about economic emancipation, correct to talk about economic emancipation. Independence was about political independence, not economic independence. But if we're talking about economic independence, then the role of government is to assist, to help people get out of poverty, break the cycle of poverty. It is a responsibility and the moral duty of the government to find ways to help, to facilitate the people getting out of poverty. For people who are not destitute, to be able to improve the quality of lives. It's all about pro-poor, pro-growth methods and programs to help people and to reduce poverty, improve the quality of life of our people. But they go with rhetoric, and of course, the rhetoric is, of course, that oil is going to be our savior. Well, we've had discussions on this program several times about oil, and we will have some in the next month too. But that, you know, oil, we have had an economy in a country that is a little better placed than many other countries in the sense that we have a diversified economy. We were not a monoculture that is dependent on one alone. We've had rice and sugar and bauxite and gold and diamonds, and an information-based technology was growing. A small tourism sector was growing. All of those sectors, timber as well, and quarrying, all of those sectors are in trouble, all. And now we're being told to be dependent and then wait for manna from heaven. Oil will change all of our situations. Well, what they've done is taken our country from a multi-sectoral economy, where if you added oil to that, that would make you less dependent on the fickleness. Because oil is fickle, depends on the world price. It depends if there's a civil war going somewhere in the Middle East. It depends. And so what we've done in 3 years is move this country that had productive sectors and dissing them and slowly causing their decline by very bad and counterproductive policies of this government, and more moving us as a country to be dependent on one thing alone: oil. And the oil ain't gonna come here, my dear friends. The oil is not being landed in Georgetown. So we will see. We have been subjected in the last 3 years to false hopes, to promises made in 2015 that have not been delivered on, false promises. And now Guyanese have to listen to exhortations to work and implying that we're all a bunch of lazy people. So what's the outlook? Well, the president goes and tells people to go to their farms, assuming they have. And you must remember, he's the one who revoked about 30 farmers' leases in Region 5. Whilst he's increased taxation, terminated over 7,000 people in sugar, terminated over 2,000 to 3,000 people in the public service, and where a number of companies have closed, Barama, for example, Demerara Timbers, BV, which is at Houston. There are a number of places that are closing down. The number of restaurants and nightclubs that have closed down. There are no shows coming in basically now as there used to be at the National Stadium because people are just not going. So the 2018 forecast, despite what the president's saying about go out there and do things, and just to pause a minute on that, people are hustling, people are trying. People are not being lazy. As I said, there'll always be a percentage of lazy people. But they're not the majority of Guyanese. The majority of Guyanese, and I've seen it, we were in government when we opened the housing program. We were criticized by the World Bank and IMF that we were giving land out at subsidized prices for house lots. And we continued. And what it did, a number of people who were able, little bit by little bit, struggling many times to be able to buy their house lot at a subsidized price, to be able to slowly go and get family and friends to make the concrete blocks, to buy their materials little bit by little bit, to build their houses, it is a testimony. It is a living testimony of the Guyanese spirit of resilience, of investment, of wanting better, not laziness. We're not lazy people, and I refuse to be subjected to anybody, including a president, talking about people as if they're lazy, if they this is unacceptable. The living proof of the Guyanese spirit to do better and to help themselves once they got the push by the government, support by the government, is the housing program of this country. Where places of land which were abandoned sugar fields or unproductive sugar fields have become now peri-urban centers. Tushan, the new Tushan. Look at Diamond, with bank and police station and fire station and a hospital and fast food places and taxi service and a mall. That didn't happen because Guyanese people are lazy. Didn't happen because people were drinking gin and vodka and rum. It happened because people wanted to do better for themselves. And people of all races, Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, mixed Guyanese, Amerindian Guyanese, have proved over and over again, once they get the little help, the little push, the little support, the opportunities to do better, they will do better. They don't need handouts, they need facilitation, they need support, they need access to services that will allow them to do better on their own. So people aren't asking for a raise. When they built their houses, they weren't asking anybody for a raise. The government facilitated that, subsidized land, got commercial banks to give loans at low interest rates for low-income workers in this country, families in this country. And the housing schemes of this country are the proof of the pudding, the proof of Guyanese ingenuity, imaginativeness, resilience, strength, and conviction to do better in their lives, and to stay here in the country they love, rather than have to hustle now and getting visas to get out of here, because they don't see any hope and any future in this country under the APNU AFC government. So the forecast, I'm hopping mad, you'll know by now, about this statement, because what it means and what it's saying to Guyanese, in particular Afro-Guyanese, which is disrespectful and insulting. But the forecast for 2018 is not a good one. And given the current high price of fuel and deplorable interior roads, traditional sectors such as rice, sugar, gold, small and medium scale, and timber could see a huge decline in production. Tourism is dependent on the interior roads functioning and being in relative good condition. That's also having trouble. So we have said, and the leading opposition has said, this failed approach to national economic management was tried in the past. It led to a bankrupt country and resulted in devastating consequences for our people. I'm sure everyone will recall that the external debt was over 900% of the GDP in 1992, which was reduced to 36% of the GDP in 2015. They plan to double it again within 5 years. This is what the leading opposition said, and it's true. This is the 1970s and 80s, coming up to 1992. There's a whole set of people born after 1992 who only know the PPP in government. But this scenario that the leading opposition paints is one which led to 61% of the Guyanese people falling below the poverty line, and in which malnutrition was high, in which beriberi was killing people. And so we've been this road before. And so whilst the government knows this country is going towards bankruptcy, knows that the financial and foreign exchange reserves are being depleted, they continue to have massive spending, and yet, as I said, anti-people, anti-growth policies. And there's no admission, no attempt to say, look, maybe we're going in the wrong path. Maybe we need to reverse some of these things. Maybe we need to come up with different things. What are they doing is borrowing more and more, and they're giving you lectures more and more about how you need to be good taxpayers. The Minister of Finance, Winston Jordan, and the coalition David Granger-led government has just plunged Guyana into the deepest depths of debt ever experienced by this 50-year-old nation, as in fact now mortgage the future of this country and its people for generations to come. And of course, we've seen the pawning of our national assets to borrow $30 billion, and we've also seen them sell our national patrimony, oil and gas, for what we call small change. And so all this huge borrowing is based on the promise of oil reserves. Maybe it would be appropriate for the government to have told the people on Emancipation Day how his government was going to fix the economy, improve the conditions of the lives of our people, particularly our children. How this good government would have created incentives and facilities to help people to become self-employed, instead of them tell them go out and work and don't drink. I know that some people say, well, alcohol is a problem. Yes, it is. I know that. But this is not the issue for platitudes. Yes, we do deal with children. We were in government. We know about children being neglected by their families. But again, this is not the majority. There are children at risk. And when you talk about children at risk and he admonishes people about their children, he must remember the school uniform program, which we instituted, that was universal for all children from nursery up to the end of secondary school to have a uniform allowance. That is, nobody's talking about that, but it's not working too well. I can say in interior areas, it's not working at all. And the NTC and the Regional Tushars Council, the Tushars said they've been robbed of the uniform allowance for the last 3 years. They haven't got it. And so again, people have to find money for uniforms. The very people that took 28 years to destroy this country's economic and political, economic base, its political governance structures, racked up a debt to 900% more than it was earning in the process, have now embarked on the same thing. And this time, they're doing it worse and in much less time. So what took them 28 years to do, they're doing in 3, 4, 5 years. The predicted U-turn to 1980 is almost completed. And so, as we said, They have mortgaged the future of generations to come with the albatross of debt, again around the necks of every Guyanese child and every unborn Guyanese child for generations to come. Well, we have, just to remind you, local government elections have been announced for November 12, 2018. And we spoke on the July 5th program about mischief afoot by the government with the LG, with the local government elections, with the creation of new local authorities and the reduction of 16 constituencies from 14 existing local authorities. And so we know what this means, that they're going to try to cut the votes of the PPP, but we're prepared to struggle. We're prepared, despite whatever is put in our path, that we will overcome. We shall overcome, as we have done long before and over again. You know, every week we've encouraged throughout the registration period for you to go and get registered, do your transfers, but that's ended now, July 8th, and you will not have a registration until next year sometime. If we want to put Guyana back on a democratic, transformative trajectory, then we have to ensure that we, all of us, vote in the local government elections. We vote and we monitor GCOM and the election processes before, on election day, and in the count like hawks. Local government 2018, we must show our strength again and let the APNU AFC know that they are not wanted. We did it in March 2016, a mere 10 months after the APNU AFC got into government with 4,500 votes, which is less than 1% of the votes, 1% of a seat, sorry, 1% of the votes, and we won 65% of the local authority, local government elections. And we must do so again on November 12, 2018. And go keep that 65%, and it's matter what they put in our path, or if possible, go higher. And then again, we have another task, and that is to show this government that in 2020 regional and general elections, it is only when the PPC is in government that this country moves forward and progresses. It is only then. Whether people, you know, like the PPP or like some of its leaders, the fact is, if we go back, and Mr. Granger says he's a historian, when we were in government in 53, in 61, in 64, the country moved forward. We reached to be the third highest growing, producing country before the 1964 elections. We went down to the bottom between Bolivia and Haiti by 1992, and between 1992 and 2015, we brought this country round and developed and reconstructed. This government now has put $30-odd billion, I think it's $32 or $34 billion, into health. The highest amount ever put into the health sector in this country. Yet, basic drugs cannot be got in many parts of the country. Worse yet if you're in the interior. Machinery is not functioning. Basic medical supplies are not there. And yet, so it's not that they didn't have money, they've given themselves enormous budgets. The budgets over the last 3 years are hitting, if you add them all up, it's almost $1 trillion. Yet every sector has been getting money, like health, like education. Yet we're seeing a deterioration. Has to do with management, has to do with how they run this place, and they can't run this place. APNU AFC cannot run the country, and therefore it is only under the PPP. Our track record speaks for itself. So we have work to do, my friends. We have work to do. And so, happy emancipation, and you figure out how you, in 2020, will be able to improve your lifestyle and your family when the PPC wins. So we're going to move now to call in, and let's see if there are any. I've stirred up any controversies and got some people hot under the collar, as they say. Let's see. So maybe I've killed the debate. I hope not. But I believe that Guyanese I know when Guyanese go abroad, they work very, very hard to provide for their families, to provide for the opportunities in those countries that they have. And they face many difficulties, and many times they face racism, they face discrimination, but they continue to work on behalf of their children. And so, yeah, we have single guys who don't, delinquent fathers, We have many families, 29% approximately, that are headed by women alone. But women work hard in the home, work hard at whatever they can do to provide for their children. Men work hard in our country. And so I find it appalling that these statements have been made on a day of such great historic significance, Emancipation Day. Well, we have, as I said, the phones are open, and I'm not seeing anybody calling in. Maybe people agree. Who knows? But we have seen also, as we go to Parliament, as you've seen in Parliament, there have been some hot sessions, including the last one, on Monday. But in Parliament, when the first parliaments were started in 1100 and something AD, so you're talking 1,000 years ago almost, the crown, the king, ran the whole thing. And so over time, the struggles for people who were representing the people were given and fought for the right to have certain immunities, the freedom of speech, to be able to represent their constituencies, and to be able to hold the crown, that is the king or the queen, to account. That has been translated in modern times to what are cabinets and executives and the democratic frameworks that we have in various constitutions, including ours. The Constitution talks about the separation of the executive, headed by the president, the legislature, and the judiciary. These three areas have checks and balances on each other to make sure that there's no abuse of power and that the democratic foundation of our country remains intact. So that we've had a combination of many laws being passed, cybercrime, the financial bills, the State Assets Recovery Authority bill, for example, aspects of areas in the telecommunications bill, the Anti-Terrorism Act. All of these are tightening a noose around the freedom of speech, the freedom of the media, the freedom of association, the freedom to have some level of privacy in a technological age. We've seen that over and over again. The debate on cybercrime, the debate recently on the anti-money laundering. The long arm, the intrusive long arm of the government is being further and further extended into our homes, into our bank accounts, into various places. And so, in Parliament, we have also been subjected to a speaker who has, and I don't have to say it because he'll probably come after me again too, but who has, in our opinion, been biased. Who has, and you watch it on television if you see the live streaming. You can see for yourselves and judge for yourselves. But the legislature is there to put a check and balance on the executive. The legislature is there to bring laws that are for the betterment of the Guyanese people, not to tighten the noose around their freedoms. And so we're not going to relinquish our right to speak. But what was funny about Monday is that a letter was written to the press by an MP, and it was published. The MP was reprimanded by the Speaker for making criticism of him. Now, we're into some very strange waters here because whilst in Parliament we know that you can't attack the Speaker on the floor, you can't criticize his ruling, and if you don't agree with it you have to bring a substantive motion, which in most parliaments, if you check their history, most of those motions fail. It does require the majority of the House to support it, and under this government, APNU AFC will not support any motion that even questions a ruling of the Speaker. But what is very strange about Monday is that this was something that happened outside of Parliament. And you may recall that months and months ago, another MP was upbraided because of what he said in his Facebook about the Speaker. In this context, the chairman of the Privilege Committee is the Speaker. The person who is the subject of the controversy is the Speaker. And you have the Prime Minister jumping up to move the MP to Privilege Committee. So the question is, so the Speaker's already ruled that the MP is out of order. He's already ruled that the MP went beyond what is allowed in Parliament, which of course is debatable in our mind. So having found him guilty, you're now sending him to the Privilege Committee, where the same Speaker is the chairman, and where the government have the majority. Interesting times. Who is going to be the judge, jury, and executioner, I ask? So we'll see. Interesting times in Parliament, but also ones that are very indicative, I keep saying, of this authoritarian move by this government, the tightening of the noose around our freedoms. And while some people feel that, that's Parliament, that's not our business, you know, the famous saying is that came out of World War II, you know, that when they came for the Jews, we weren't Jews, it didn't matter to us. When they came for the Catholics, it didn't matter, we weren't Catholics. They came for the communists, we aren't communists. They came for the socialists, we're not socialists. Came for the trade union leaders, no, we're not registered union members. And then they came for us, and there was no one left to defend us. So they must always remember, as Martin Carter said, we're all consumed, we're all involved, we're all consumed. We're all involved, we're all consumed. And so we have to remember that when we look at the totality of what's going on, these are not good signals. This is not how a healthy democracy functions. It's not how a healthy democracy grows and expands. This is not how a healthy country grows and expands. These are indications of a country that is having trouble and that it needs to be able to have a change that will be able to set things right back, put things back into perspective, put our democratic foundations and framework back into order, and not have, you know, our constitution being undermined with the appointment of a chairman of the GCOM who's going to run the elections in 2018 and 2020 in violation of our constitution, in which local authority elections are also going to be matters in the court, because again, the ministers has overridden what the law provides for. And so when they don't like a law which they passed and brought, they then go and change the law to make sure they can reverse and cover up what they've done already. So they did that with the 6 tied NDCs, that they were tied. We came up with compromises. 3, you had we had parity of seats, but you have a few more votes than us in 3, and we have 3 where we had more votes than them. Let's split and alternate chairman and vice chairman throughout, or mayor and deputy mayor. They refused, and Minister Bulkan went and appointed his own chair and mayor of these tied communities, which are in violation of the law. And we went to court. Well, that's 2 years. The matter has not been heard in court as yet. And of course, they then came and changed the law, so that the next time in these 2080 elections, if there is a tie, there are new mechanisms for it to be done, and it will not require by-elections. It will be done by the overseer or the clerk, calculating in a mathematical way how to break the tie. And so you may have paid attention, now you may not. But we've had, so these are all indicators that we have to be very careful about. We have to be aware of, and to know that these are not indicators of what you call a bill of health that is good. It's not a good bill of health. You know, this is a country that is showing signs of some serious problems and needs immediate assistance, and that the government is totally resistant, living in another land, living in some la-la land of their own creation, that does not want to address the concerns of the people, whether it's the private sector, the truck drivers, the vendors, the trade unionists, the teachers, the public servants, the discipline services. They are beyond all of that. They are becoming almost untouchable in terms of their isolation from reality. And so we have had a busy week, and so we hope we're having Parliament again on the 8th of August, and then we go into recess. So we must show our strength. And I hope that in the weekend coming that you will have a good weekend. Again, I always tell you, don't drink and drive. Don't overdo it. It's a different thing than telling people, making people feel that, you know, if you have a drink, that it's wrong. Or that you're lazy, or you're not working, or you're not spending the money on the right things. This is not, the state doesn't have the responsibility nor the right to make such interventions. What the state's responsibility is to assist, create facilities, an environment that will enable people to help themselves to do better, not to give them lectures. So have a blessed week until we meet again right here on Matters of Public Importance next Thursday, 12:30 to 1:30. And I keep saying to you, and you must be tired of me saying it, but I'll keep saying it, I promise you. Struggle we shall, and silent we shall not be. Silence is the greatest enemy of democracy, enemy to democracy. Silence makes those in power think they can get away with anything. Silence helps those who want more control and less democracy, those who want to move this country to a police state. And the next elections, the people will make their votes count again, and there will be a change, and we in the PPC government shall have to start all over again, as in 1992, to reconstruct, to put this economy back on a firm and stable footing. Restore the programs which help the poor and vulnerable and those at risk, and restore the independence of the judiciary and legislature from the executive interference. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Don't drink and drive. Meet me back here next Thursday, 12:30 to 1:30. All the best to you. Bye-bye. Ta-ta.